We are on Daf Yud Tet Amud Aleph 19a1. Okay. Amar Rav Sheshet. Yeah, you see that?
No. Where are we? Oh, yes. Okay.
The Gemara just asked the question of what does it mean to be inside, and we expressed that it means inside, actually, inside the azara. And even if you had a fruit plate that was half in and half out, the ones on the inside would be already bikurim, and if you would eat them in tumah, it would be zara karev, or a non-kohen would eat them, then there would be a punishment of mita. And the ones that are outside, they never made it in. They were designated for bikurim, but they're not yet bikurim, so they don't have the sanctity of bikurim. Now the Gemara is going to go back to something that we already discussed before, and try and understand the logic underneath it. Amar Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet, but just by the way, I want to point this out. We are going through a masterclass right now in understanding how the Gemara arrives at the maskanot that it arrives at with regards to the limudim.
What is the maskanot?
Maskanot means you have a hava amina, which is what it means I would have thought. Maskana means where I come out at the end. So the final analysis results in this. So every time you find there's a halacha and the Gemara says, oh, we learn it from the pasuk, or we learn it from Kal Vachomer. What we've been doing over this past sugya is understanding the backdoor workings of how we get from a pasuk in the Torah to a law in the Mishnah to a machloket in the Gemara. Okay, that's what we've been going through, and Be'ezrat Hashem, hopefully we'll go through this and come out the other side also better able to understand the process of limudim, of how we learn the things that we learn from the Pesukim. Amar Rav Sheshet. So we already saw this idea. Now the Gemara is going to ask who's the backing, who signed the PG on this statement from the Amorah. Amar Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet said, Bikurim hanacha me'akevet bahem, kiryayin makevet bahem. Bikurim, at what point am I done in terms of being able to eat from the bikurim? From the point where I read the verses, or from the point where I put it down in front of the mizbeach? What is an essential part of the mitzvah? So much so that if I don't have it, then it's not bikurim. I haven't fulfilled my obligation. The Gemara Rav Sheshet says, putting it down by the mizbeach is obligatory to the point where if you don't have it, it's as if you didn't do it. And kiryah reading is in ma'akevet b'hem, is not me'akev. It doesn't withhold you from fulfilling the mitzvah. The Gemara says, Kiman, which Tana is Rav Sheshet going according to? Where did he get this from? The Gemara answers, Ki hai Tana, according to the Tana, the Tanya that says in the Braita. Rabbi Yossi amar shlosha dvarim mishum shlosha zekenim. Rabbi Yossi said three different things in the names of three different rabbis. He he gave over these three ideas from three different sages. The Gemara is only going to bring the one limud, the one lesson that's relevant to our discussion over here. Rabbi Ishmael says, maybe I might think that today you have fruits and vegetables, Yerushalayim, you separate maaser. I would think that you're allowed to take that maaser to Jerusalem, right, and eat it in Jerusalem. Same way the law was that way in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. That is also the case nowadays that we live in the exile after the destruction of the temple.
So he's just picking that as a way to extrapolate the concept from it.
Exactly. We're going to find it almost from a side point completely. How do we know that hanacha, placing it by the mizbeach, is the bit that is essential, and kiryah, the reading, is not essential? Where are we going to see that from? We're going to see from something that will come out in the Braita. Okay? So the Braita says, Rabbi Ishmael said, I might think that you could do Maaser Sheni right now, and you could take it to Jerusalem and eat it. Vedinu. And the idea is not true. How do we know it's not true? Because of an obvious point. Bechor ta'un havat makom. We know that a bechor, the firstborn animal, requires being brought to the place. What's the makom in this case? We're talking Yerushalayim. He brings Yerushalayim. Maaser sheni ta'un havat makom. Maaser sheni also needs to be brought to this place, to the place Yerushalayim. Ma bechor eno el b'fnei habayit. Just like a bechor that has the law of being brought to the place to eat, okay, is only during the time the temple stands. Maaser sheni, also maaser eno ela b'fnei habayit. It's only when the Beit HaMikdash is there, right? The Gemara is basically asking a very simple question. The pasuk says that you will eat these foods lifnei Hashem, in front of God, in the place that God designated. Now, do we say that the place is lifnei Hashem? Is it in front of God during the time when the temple sits? So that's God's home, and therefore it's in front of God? Or is it always, Yerushalayim is always b'fnei Hashem? Okay? That's the underlying question over here. Now, if we know Bechor, you can't eat Bechor now in Jerusalem, and that requires being eaten in the place, Yerushalayim, so too, this also, which requires being eaten in the place, should also not be relevant after the destruction of the temple. The Gemara says...
So they land that without the Beit HaMikdash, it's not relevant.
He's saying it should not be relevant.
Because of
this logic.
Because we learned that in that case, you can't do it without the Beit HaMikdash.
Bechor and Maaser both require being eaten in Jerusalem. If Bechor is only during the time of the Beit HaMikdash, so I'd imagine that also Maaser is only in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. Okay? Gemara says you can't make such a limud. Why? The Bechor requires putting blood on the Mizbeach. The Bechor, it's a Korban. It requires burning the pieces of the Korban that are supposed to be burned on the Mizbeach. You don't have a temple, you don't have the service. So if you don't have the service, you don't have the Korban. Bechor.
Okay.
So you're trying to prove to me from Bechor needing the Beit HaMikdash in existence to Maaser has no need for blood on the Mizbeach, has no need for the Mizbeach itself.
What do you do for Maaser?
You bring it to Jerusalem and you eat it in Jerusalem.
That's it. So
That's
it
it.
doesn't matter.
So the Gemara is asking, I get that these are both stated in front of God, but that in front of God has an added requirement which makes it impossible to be able to have it after Beit HaMikdash is destroyed.
It's not a good mashal.
Correct, exactly. And we prove it's not a good mashal because this requires something that would preclude it from being used, from being eaten after the Beit HaMikdash. The Gemara says, but Maaser is not that way. So therefore, you can't prove it logically from Bechor that Maaser needs the Beit HaMikdash to exist in order to eat it. The Gemara says, so Rabbi Ishmael then had to move on to another point. Bikurim yochichu. So therefore, he says, let me learn it from Bikurim. Bikurim requires placing, right? Why do we bring it from Bikurim? Bikurim requires being eaten in Jerusalem. Also needs to be eaten in that place, correct? And Bikurim does not need to have blood on the Mizbeach. It's fruit. It does not need to have a portion burned in the Mizbeach. So therefore, it's a basket of fruit. So therefore, if Bikurim requires the Beit HaMikdash, so too, Maaser requires the Beit HaMikdash in existence. So nowadays, you would not be able to eat Maaser just like you would not be able to bring Bikurim. Correct? Asks the Gemara, what kind of question? Asks Rabbi Yishmael on himself. Ma lebikurim sheken teunim hanacha.
He asks it on himself?
Yeah, in other words, he's saying
his own argument.
Exactly. You might learn it from here, you can't learn it from there. You might learn it from here, you can't learn it from there. Where do you learn it from? From a third place, okay? So in this second step, you might have learned it from Bikurim, because Bikurim doesn't have any sprinkling of blood on the Mizbeach. It doesn't have anything to burn on the Mizbeach. So therefore, we could learn that just as Bikurim is required only during the time of the Beit HaMikdash, so too, Maaser Sheni is only at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. The Gemara asks, Bikurim sheken ta'un, Hanacha. Rabbi Ishmael asked on himself, Bikurim require being placed by the Mizbeach. So it's true, it doesn't require blood. It doesn't require a service on the Mizbeach, but it requires being placed next to the Mizbeach. If there's no Beit HaMikdash, there's no Mizbeach. So therefore, you can't prove from Bikurim's inability to be brought Bizman Hazeh to the inability of Maaser Bizman Hazeh. Maybe Maaser, yes, and Bikurim not. That is the second stage, and that's what we're going to be referring back to in a minute. So what
seems
is
like a very obvious thing for him to even throw that out there? Like I would imagine he knows the laws of Bikurim.
But yes, but what he's expressing is that it's not a korban. On the korbanot, don't bring a proof because a korban needs to be brought. On Bikurim, maybe Bikurim works because it's not a korban. The answer is no, because it requires hanacha. It's not a
different reason relating to the mizbeach.
Correct. It doesn't need the mizbeach per se. It just needs to be placed next to it.
Right.
Okay, fine. Says the Gemara. Okay, so where does he learn it from in the final analysis? Talmud Lomad the pasuk. The pasuk says the same pasuk that we've read already a bunch of times. V'achalta, and you will eat it there in front of Hashem Elokecha, right? In front of Hashem, your God. And it quotes all the different things that we said. This refers to Maaser. That's Bikurim. That's Bechor. That's Todah Shalamim. That's Chatat Asham. Makish Maaser leBechor. The Torah compared Maaser and Bechor because they're both in the same pasuk. Ma Bechor eno ela lefnei habayit. Just like Bechor is only when the Beit HaMikdash is in existence. Af Maaser eno ela lefnei habayit. Maaser is also only lefnei habayit. So the question is, we just asked that you can't bring a logical proof from Bechor to Maaser. Why? Because from Bechor. Why Bechor? Because Bechor requires
On the Mizbeach.
no Bechor. Yes, it requires on the Mizbeach. Burning the emurim, bringing the blood
Was next
to the Mizbeach. So the Gemara now just says we're connecting Bechor and Maaser because it puts it in the same pasuk. What this needs. But I just asked you a question on that.
We already proved that it's not connected.
The answer is the question only works when I'm trying to do that logically in my head. I'm saying I could prove from here to here. If the Torah tells you this law also applies over here, your idea, well, this has this stringency, that stringency, not relevant.
Okay.
The Torah is telling you this law applies here. Okay, good? I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say, as an example, the Torah tells you a certain law with regards to the holiness of an animal. Would you be able to prove anything with regards to the holiness of an animal to the holiness of a human? No. I could ask you many questions, how they differentiate. You never dipped an animal in a mikveh. There's lots of differences between the two. But if the Torah said, just like the kedusha of an animal, so too the holiness of a human. There's no, your logic is irrelevant. The Torah is telling you that law is in existence in both cases. So that's what he's doing over here. So therefore, Maaseh Sheni is only eaten in Jerusalem in the time the Bet HaMikdash stands. Now, I want to just throw you a curveball because we're going to use this curveball a little bit later.
Wait,
okay?
1 second, sorry. The last piece. So now that we have this Torah pasuk, we put it to bed. They're done the same way.
Put it to bed. Bechor is Makish is compared to Maaser, and if Bechor is only in time of the Beit HaMikdash, for whatever reason, even if it's just because it's a korban, the same thing is true for for Maaser.
No, regardless of the context.
Okay? Now the Gemara says, okay, let's go back, rewind to 2. So we now know what Rabbi Ishmael holds with regards to Maaser Sheni Bizman Hazeh, in the time of no Beit HaMikdash. Okay? The Gemara says, but let's go back for 1 second. When we were trying to learn it from Bikurim, what did he say? Let's learn from Bikurim that you could only eat Maaser in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. And we asked the question. We said, no, you can't learn it. You know why? Because Bikurim has this special law that it requires hanacha next to the mizbeach, and that is not relevant by maaser. So therefore, you can't learn the maaser. If Rev Sheshet holds, v'im ita, if he holds, lifroch male bikurim sheken taon kirya v'hanacha, if he holds that the bikurim requires the reading of the bikurim in front of the kohen at the temple, then why does he say that you can't learn it from here because of hanacha next to the mizbeach? He should say you can't learn it from here because it needs kiryah and it needs hanacha. Kiryah also needed to be spoken to the kohen in the temple. So if Rabbi Ishmael held that was essential, he could have asked this double-headed question that Bikurim is different because of reading and because of placing. But he didn't say that. He said it's different because of placing, indicating that he must hold that placing is essential, without which you don't have it, but reading is not essential, without it you don't have it.
Otherwise he would have brought it up as an
argument. You see? It's so precise, each step of the Gemara. The Gemara says, what do you mean? Amar Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi says, no, I disagree. Maybe it's not essential to the point that if you don't have it, it doesn't count. But everyone agrees, mitzvah mi'ika. Everyone agrees it is a commandment in the Torah that when you bring Bikurim, you read out this line of Arami Oved Avi, all the history that got us to this point. So even if it's not le'ikuva, it's still a mitzvah. And he could have asked Vilema mitzvah v'lifroch. Let him say that it's a mitzvah and ask the question. In other words, Bikur, you want to tell me that from the fact that Bikurim can't be done in the temple, only when the temple's standing, also Maaser, only when the temple's standing. The Gemara, Rabbi Ishmael has a question on himself. What do you mean? It's not the same. Bikurim requires the Bet HaMikdash because you need hanacha. Rav Ashi says, even if Kiryah is non-essential, you still can ask the question. You're trying to bring me a proof from Bikurim requiring the Bet HaMikdash? Bikurim requires the Bet HaMikdash because there's a mitzvah to say the Bikurim, even if it's non-essential. It's still a mitzvah in the Torah, in the Bet HaMikdash. So therefore, says the Gemara, maybe the reason why he omitted it is not because it's non-essential, but it's for a different reason. And Rav Ashi says, Kivan ika bikure hager, tebai lemema shenish b'Hashem lavotenu, v'lo matzi amar, lo psika le. He says, beautiful. The reason why he didn't say that example is because there is an example of a bikurim that does not require reading. Which bikurim?
So a convert.
The bikurim of a convert. Because what does he have to say? Arami oved avi. My father. The land that Hashem gave, avotenu, it's our fathers. It's not his father. So he doesn't read the statement of the bikurim if he's a ger, if he's a convert. So what did Rabbi Yishmael say? He said something in bikurim that's relevant to every Jew. Not that's relevant to every Jew except for converts.
Definitely not Syrian.
Right? Now the Gemara actually, this is quite interesting. The Gemara over here is actually not according to the halakha. Why? What do we hold? When a ger stands up, a convert stands up to pray. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu, Elokei avotenu.
You can say it.
Is he allowed to say Elokei avotenu?
Yes.
He's allowed to say it. Why? It's not the God of his fathers. We hold.
He's in the tzibur.
We hold that every neshama that converts to Judaism was part and parcel at Har Sinai. They're part of the spiritual family of the Jewish people. And therefore, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov are considered their fathers as well.
The declaration is different.
And therefore, the halakha is that they would be allowed to say the beracha and they would be allowed to say the declaration. That's what we hold the halakha.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. So
but there's a Mishnah. There's one Mishnah. There's a Mishnah that says that a ger is not obligated to say it. So says the Rav Ashi, Rabbi Yishmael stuck with something that was universal and not something that there's a disagreement on or is a discrepancy on who's bringing the korbanot. So that's why Rabbi Yishmael skipped it. But really, you have no proof that Rabbi Yishmael holds that bikurim, that reading is a requirement, is or is not a requirement from this point. Okay? Now, the Gemara now is going back to what we just learned. Okay? Rabbi Yishmael, what did he just tell us? He just told us that Maaser Sheni, if you want to learn it, you have to learn it from the Pasuk. Right? That Maaser nowadays does not require, would not work in Jerusalem. He learns it from what? From the Pasuk. But we could not learn it from Bechor, because that's a Korban. And you could not learn it from Bikurim, because Bikurim was requiring to be put next to the Mizbeach. Let's learn it with a Mahatzad. What does Mahatzad mean? This is a very important concept you need to learn for all of Shas, for all the Gemara. Mahatzad means, what is the common denominator? That's the language that we use to describe the process of learning. So in other words, let's say you have one object that has to pay a fine. Okay. Now I have another object that has to pay a fine. Now I want to know, could I learn to the third object, which is, no, it doesn't, I don't know what the law is. Could I learn from either of these? I go to one, I ask a question. Now, it's not good, because maybe this one is more strict than this one, and therefore that's why it's obligated. But this one is less strict. Then I go to the other one, and I find something that's more strict about the other object, and therefore that's the reason why not. There's something called a ma'atzad, which says, if you thought that the reason why you have the fine is because of reason A, let me show you that the other one has the fine and doesn't have reason A. But what does it have? It has reason B. So if you think that the reason for the fine is reason B, let's go back and see, in reason A, the first one didn't have reason B. So therefore, it is neither reason A nor reason B which can claim exclusivity for the reason for the fine. Because this one is obligated without reason B, this one is obligated without reason A. The tzad hashaveh shabehem, the mahatzad, the connection between these two is that they are a scenario of stealing, which has to pay a fine. So also, my third case is a scenario of stealing, it should have to pay the fine. That's what's called a mahatzad. Okay? Because you can't tell me, Mr. Me, number 3, that I do not get a fine because I don't have reason A. You know why? Because that one...
You also don't have reason B.
Sorry?
Because you also don't have reason B.
I'm the third one. Yeah. I don't have A or B.
Right.
But I'm telling you, I also am a stolen object. I should get a fine. You're going to tell me, but you don't have reason A. I'll tell you, yeah, but you see, you don't need reason A to be chayav. Why? Look at B. But then you'll tell me, okay, but you don't have reason B. I'll tell you, but you don't need reason B to be hayav. How do I know? Okay. Look at A. Guys, put on Zoom. Put on mute. Thank you. Okay? So you guys understand?
Does C come into play, or D, or E?
No. In other words, I'll tell you, the baseline reason is that everything you steal has a fine. You're telling me, no, you can't learn that. There's reason A. I'll tell you that's not the reason, because look at B. You tell me, well, that's reason B. I'll tell you, well, that's not the reason.
You're proving by showing that all of them have some similarity, a lack of similarity, that you can't say that you can't learn from it.
That both of them have that I don't have.
Negatives, yeah.
You got that?
I think so.
So if you were able to tell me, well, listen, you're right. You don't have A, but then you could say B. You don't have B, but then you could say A. So you could always get out of it and say that I should also have the fine. That's what the limud would be, okay? But if I could show you that both this case and that case have something in common that the third one doesn't, then that reason C, which they both have, will knock out the learning to the last one. You got that? Is that clear so far?
Not 100%.
Okay, one more time. Let's say if you steal something, there's a fine.
Yes.
Reason in case A, case B. Now I'm case C. I want to say also by case C you should have to pay a fine. Okay. So I'll tell you, look at case A. They stole over there, you have to pay a fine. But they answer you back, no. The reason why you have to pay over there a fine is because of reason A, different.
Right.
I'll tell you, yeah, but that's not the reason why you pay a fine in reason A. You know how I know? Because in case B, you don't have reason A, and you still pay the fine.
It's a different reason.
But then they tell you, yeah, but the reason why in case B you have to pay the fine is because it has B that you don't have. I'll tell you, yeah, but B can't be the reason. You know why? Because case A doesn't have case B, it still has to pay.
The fact that they all have some...
The fact that the two of them you could ask a question, but you can't ask a common question.
Right.
Means that wherever you go, I could say that that's not the reason for the chidush.
You don't need a commonality? You don't need a commonality?
If there was a commonality between those two, then it's a problem. Because I could say...
They all don't have a commonality.
So,
yes.
Okay.
I got it.
You got it? Yeah. Okay. So over here is the same thing. The Gemara says, let's learn from a mahatzad. Because it's true that maaser is not a korban. True. But you don't have to have a korban in order to learn it, because look at Bechor. Bechor is not a korban. Yeah? You're at 10%. Okay? But then I could ask you back, well, you obviously don't need to be a korban, because Bikurim is also only in the time of the temple. But then you'll answer me, yeah, but Bikurim you have to put it next to the Mizbeach. But I'll answer you, yeah, but that must not be the reason, because look, at the first one, doesn't require you to put it next to the Mizbeach, and still is only during the time of the Beit HaMikdash. So neither of those could be the reason. So therefore me, i.e. Maaser, I want to learn that I'm also only in Jerusalem in the time of the temple. So the only way you could solve this problem is if you say that the two of them have something in common that I don't have. Because then I can't say...
There's a commonality.
Exactly. I can't say that, look, that's not the reason for it, because the other one doesn't have it. Because you'll be able to say that it does. The Gemara answers something really obvious. And I want you guys to figure it out. Bechor has to be brought on the Mizbeach. Bikurim needs to be put next to the Mizbeach. So I'll tell you, you can't bring me from here, you can't bring me from there. It's not the same thing. This one's not a korban. That one doesn't require placing on the Mizbeach. So what do they have in common?
Nothing.
What do they have in common?
Different.
What do they? That was the Gemara's question. We should learn it from there because of the Ma'atzad. Sorry?
The requirement to be brought.
Maaser also needs to be brought.
What are the three examples? It's Maaser,
Bechor, Bikurim, and Maaser.
Bechor, Bikurim.
Bechor is a korban. Bikurim needs to be put next to Mizbeach. Maaser wants to learn from one of the two, and we said that this one's a Bechor, this one's a korban, that one needs to be placed next to the Mizbeach. So what would these two have in common that would then make it impossible to learn from the two?
Beit HaMikdash in those two.
Why do you need the Beit HaMikdash?
Because you need to put that next to the Mizbeach.
Next to the what?
Mizbeach.
Says the Gemara. Mishum di'ika lemifrach ma la'atzar shebehen, because you could ask a question on that learning of these two combined. Ma la'atzar shaveh shebehen shekin yesh bahem tzad mizbeach. Yes, one is a korban on the mizbeach. The other one is sitting next to the mizbeach. But they both need a mizbeach. And therefore, when you're the third one and you want to say, well, it can't be the reason because that one, you can't do that. Because they both need a mizbeach. Maaser doesn't need a mizbeach. So therefore, you can't learn from either of them. You can't learn from both of them. So we have to learn from the actual pasuk itself, the hekesh that the Rabbi Ishmael said. The Gemara says, "Umay kasavar." We learn. This is high level mechanics we're learning here. That's why I'm giving you the examples off of the page, because I need you to understand the concepts larger than this case, so that you have it for application.
That's why I stopped you about 20 times.
That's good, excellent. Says the Gemara.
I'm taking Ray Cheer's place.
Umay kasavar. And what the Gemara now said that Ishmael holds, right, that Maaser can't be eaten today. But we said with regards to Bechor was obvious. Now, why is Bechor obvious to Rabbi Ishmael that you can't eat it nowadays? Umay kasavar. Now, I have to explain this. You all should jump down my throat. Why is Rabbi Ishmael looking only to prove that Maaser can't be eaten nowadays in Jerusalem without the temple? How come he's not asking that question about Bechor?
Because we know Bechor needs a Mizbeach.
Why? Because Bechor is
Is his Korban.
it's a Korban. So what's the Gemara asking?
It's an obvious question.
Genius. You know what the case of the Gemara is over here? The Gemara wants to know, what's Rabbi Ishmael's problem with eating Bechor in Jerusalem? Is it inherent or is it procedural? Let me explain the point. This is what the Chachamim explain. Let's say the Romans are marching on the temple. I see them coming in the distance. I grab my Bechor, I run into the Beit HaMikdash, I do the whole Korban. Now I want to eat it. By the time I got my meat out of the Beit HaMikdash, they burned the Beit HaMikdash to the ground. So I already did the avodah. Could I eat the Bechor now that there's no Mizbeach? Now that there's no Beit HaMikdash?
Yes.
In Jerusalem?
Yes.
Do you understand what I just did?
Oh yeah, because now
I took your question away.
It's where's the Ikar? Is it? Can you still do it even though the Beit HaMikdash doesn't exist anymore?
What's the reason why Bechor is precluded from being eaten during the time when the temple's there? Is it because of the service? Or is it because that the eating itself has a problem?
Oh, that's a great question.
It's a great question. So the Gemara is asking, why is Rabbi Ishmael only asking this question on Maaser? Why wouldn't he ask it also on Bechor? By the way, same point could be made about Bikurim. Bikurim cannot be separated after the temple is destroyed. Do you know that? No. So we're asking this whole question, could you eat the Bikurim and after the temple is destroyed? What kind of question is that? You can't separate Bikurim after the temple is destroyed. The question is, what if I separated Bikurim before the temple was destroyed? By the time I get it to Jerusalem...
Can you eat it?
By the way, funniest thing, when is the Beit HaMikdash destroyed? When was the Beit HaMikdash destroyed? You know, what day?
Oh, on Shabbat.
Shabbat, end of the summer.
Oh, it was a fast.
It's right before...
No, it was a joke.
No, it's not a joke.
Got it.
It's not a joke.
Why?
The second temple was a fast.
It was?
Was it really?
Because the first temple.
Oh, I was gonna say you can't.
No, but they didn't have the fast while they had the Beit HaMikdash. All right, they abolished it because they had the Beit HaMikdash back.
Right.
Okay, now the Beit HaMikdash destroyed on Shabbat. When does that fall out? End of the summer. What's that right before? Which holiday?
Rosh Hashanah.
And
Yom Kippur.
and
Sukkot.
when do you come up to do Bikurim?
Sukkot.
On
It's the
Sukkot.
last time you could do
So
it.
this question I'm bringing you about Bikurim and having designated it for Bikurim,
Happened.
and not, it's not like, oh, you're coming up with this case. That was the case for all of the Jewish people.
Wow.
Everyone had separated Bikurim, and now everyone would not have the opportunity to bring Beit HaMikdash. We're not there yet, because now we're talking about Bechor. My Kasavar asked the Gemara, what does Rabbi Ishmael hold with regards to the Bechor? Is Bechor's preclusion from being eaten, is that about the Avodah, or is it essentially related to Bechor itself? Now, this is a little bit complicated. We're just going to do this one piece, and then we have Mincha in about 1 minute. I Kasavar, the Gemara asks, my Kasavar, what made him draw this distinction? I Kasavar, Kiddusha Rishona, Kiddusha L'Shata, Kiddusha L'Atid Lavo, Afilu Bechor Nami. I Kasavar, Kiddusha Rishona, Kiddusha L'Shata, V'lo Kiddusha L'Atid Lavo, Afilu Bechor Nami Tibaer. The Gemara says as follows. There's a big question. When they sanctified the Beit HaMikdash, when they sanctify it, were they sanctifying it that it should be a place which was kadosh for the time that it existed?
Or forever.
Or were they saying it forever? It's called Kidsha Rishuna, the first holiness that they instituted. Was it Lisha'ata, for its hour, for the time that it existed? Or was it for also Kidsha La'atid Lavo? Was there also a Kiddusha for later? The other opinion says, no, they made it Kadosh while it was there, but it's not Kadosh for afterwards. So the Gemara says, if Rabbi Ishmael holds that the holiness that they instituted was for then and forever, then Bechor also, you should be able to eat when you go to that place, because it's still B'fnei Hashem, it's still sanctified and in front of God. But if you hold, So therefore, Bechor you should also be able to eat, not only Maaser. Why did Ishmael only ask the question about Maaser? The Gemara asks, and if it's the other way, if Rabbi Ishmael is of the opinion that it was only sanctified for that hour, but it's not holy after that hour, then also Afilu Bechor, and if he holds that the initial Kedusha was for then and not for later, he should also ask the question of Bechor as well, whether Bechor as well would have would be able to be eaten in Jerusalem today. We're going to pick up from this question, Be'ezrat Hashem, next class. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.